I'm going to click the button now. Ready.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Kypros Nicolaides, and I'm the President of the National Federation of Cypriots. Firstly, on behalf of all of us, I'd like to wish everyone a very happy and healthy New Year 2021. Thank you for joining us for tonight's virtual event in conversation with Professor Kypros Nicolaides, hosted by the Federation and the Cypriot Societies. I'm proud to be joined this evening by His Excellency, the High Commissioner for Cyprus, Mr. Andreas Kalkouris, the co-presidents of the Cyprus Medical Society, Nicolas Galazis and Savas Hadjiphilippou, and of course, our guest of honor tonight, Professor Kypros Nicolaides, who is both a prominent member of our UK Cypriot diaspora and is also world famous in his professional field. Thank you very much, Professor Nicolaides, for accepting our invitation this evening. His program of research and teaching has made King's College Hospital the largest and most renowned centre for fetal medicine around the world. Now, by way of an introduction, Professor Nicolaides, or Kypros as he prefers to be called, was born in 1953 in Paphos in Cyprus and studied biochemistry and physiology, followed by medicine at King's College, graduating in 1978. During his studies, he was very active in the Students' Union and regularly participated in our rallies here in the UK for a free United Cyprus. He has held the position of Professor of Fetal Medicine at King's College since 1992 and is also the founder and chairman of the UK charity, the Fetal Medicine Foundation, which he set up in 1995. Amongst his numerous awards and achievements, he was recently elected to the US National Academy of Medicine in 2020 for improving the care of pregnant women worldwide with pioneering, rigorous and creative approaches and making seminal contributions to prenatal diagnosis and every major obstetrical disorder. Now, this is considered to be one of the highest honors in the fields of health and medicine and recognizes individuals who have demonstrated outstanding professional achievement and commitment to service. Now, lots of you will recognize Kypros from the recent Netflix documentary, The Surgeon's Cut, for his pioneering work on twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. And whilst Professor Nicolaides has enjoyed significant professional success, he has always been by the side of our diaspora. He has never forgotten about the ongoing Turkish occupation of Cyprus and has been a regular at our community events, our parliamentary receptions, seminars, rallies, and indeed most recently, he was the guest speaker at our National Day celebrations 2 years ago. So that radicalism, Kypros, that you talked about in The Surgeon's Cut has really never left you. Now, before we begin, the Presidential Commissioner had planned to join us this evening, but due to an urgent and last-minute matter, he cannot be with us. However, he has pre-recorded a message for tonight's event that we will play now.
Dear friends, good evening. I would like to express to you my warmest and most heartfelt wishes for you and your families throughout this new year, bringing you great success with new opportunities, but above all, personal health, progress, and prosperity. This past year has brought unexpected challenges, mostly due to the coronavirus pandemic, and we thank you for all the effort and commitment you have shown as we adjusted in tough times. Dear friends, it's a distinct honor and a great pleasure to be here online with you today to introduce a Cypriot UK professor, a great friend, Kypros Nicolaides, a pioneer in the field of fetal medicine, one of the greatest honors and achievements in health and medicine worldwide. I would like, first and foremost, to convey to you the heartfelt greetings of President Anastasiadis and to express to Professor Nicolaides our collective deepest gratitude for everything he is doing all these years as a prominent member of Cyprus diaspora in UK and worldwide. Before I move on, I would like to thank the organizers, especially the president of the National Federation of Cypriots in UK, my good friend Christos Karaolis, as well as the presidents of the Cyprus Medical Society in UK, Savas Hattifilippou and Nicholas Galazis, and all contributors for this brilliant initiative, and thank them for the opportunity to participate. I would like also to take this opportunity to thank the High Commissioner Andreas Kagouris and his associates for the great job they are doing there and the great support to our diaspora. Christos has already referred to Kypros' incredible achievements. As him being a part of our Cypriot community in the UK, we feel really so proud. In these strange and challenging times created by the COVID-19 pandemic around the world, I think the efforts of our doctors and medical professionals have come to mean so much more and are rightfully being recognized as truly heroic and admirable. And of course, Professor Nicolaides is both inspiring and remarkable and fantastic role model for other Cypriots to look up to. Dear friends, I would like once again to congratulate Kypros for so deservedly being elected to the National Academy of Medicine in the USA in recognition of his hard and successful work carried out over a number of decades. Only 10 doctors outside the United States have been selected by the American Academy of Medicine. And my friend Kypros, you being one of them, and you make us in Cyprus feel extremely proud of you. Your groundbreaking research in fetal and maternal medicine has saved countless lives over the years. At this point, it is important to highlight that President Anastasiadis, acknowledging Professor Nicolaides' exceptional achievement and honoring the core values and principles that he exemplifies as a professor, most notably his long-standing commitment to public service and to the cause of his profession, awarded him during the World Conference of Cyprus Diaspora in July 2018 the Medal of Exceptional Services to the Republic of Cyprus. In this regard, Professor Nicolaides has recently been informed by President Anastasiadis' decision to present to him, when circumstances permit, with the Grand Cross of the Order of Makarios III, the country's highest distinction awarded to individuals as a token of gratitude and appreciation for his outstanding support and services to humanity, through which made proud the Cypriot people and our diaspora. Dear friends, I will be amiss on my behalf if I did not extend my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the Cypriot diaspora residing in the UK and around the world. Your contribution has been indeed instrumental in mobilizing the interest and the involvement of key policymakers in the United Kingdom in our efforts to reach a settlement on the Cyprus question. We are truly proud and grateful for the achievements of our successful diaspora. On behalf of the government, the president, but also of the people of Cyprus, I thank you. Cyprus diaspora has many successful individuals, many successful professionals, and Kypros, you are a great example of such an individual. I'm sure that you are motivated most of the UK Cypriots, as well as Cypriots all over the world, to follow in your footsteps, even if it's not in the medical field, but in other areas. You demonstrate that there is room for them to achieve things in their lives. I wish you all the best, my good friend, both in your personal and professional life. Before I conclude my intervention, I would like to refer to Professor Nicolaides' words during the award ceremony at the Presidential Palace in 2018, where, among others, he said, and I will say this in Greek, αυτό που με κάνει να νιώθω ιδιαίτερα περήφανος, είπε ο Κύπρος, είναι διότι είμαι Έλληνας Κύπριος. Δέχομαι αυτήν την τιμή εκ μέρους όλων των Κυπρίων της Διασποράς. Ο κάθε Κύπριος της Διασποράς, με τον δικό του τρόπο, προωθεί τον αγώνα του λαού μας. Άνθρωπος, πατριώτης, επιστήμονας, ο Kypros Nicolaides. Αυτά τα λόγια υπερηφάνειας τα λένε όλα. Σε ευχαριστούμε, Κύπρο, για όλα.
Kypros, let me be the first to congratulate you on the announcement that the Commissioner made about the award of the Grand Cross of the Order of Margarios III. It is richly deserved, and we are all so very proud. And thank you again for making the time to be with us tonight. We would like to structure tonight's Q&A around three key themes that Nicola, Sava, and I will cover. Firstly, around medicine and your career. Secondly, a bit about Cyprus. We've already spoken about how that's close to your heart. And then thirdly, a bit about Kypros the person. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Nicola and Sava to talk a bit about your medical career.
Firstly, thank you, Christo, and the Federation for your great effort and support in the organization of this event. Professor, on behalf of the Cyprus Medical Society of the UK and myself and Savas at a personal level, many thanks for accepting this invitation. And I'm very much looking forward to this discussion this evening. Prof, I always call you the rock star of medicine. You were never afraid to challenge conventional practice. This is obvious. It has been showcased already in the Netflix series, the Surgeon's Cut, where you describe how you pioneered certain surgical interventions. But that's just one of your tens and possibly hundreds of very, very important discoveries in the field of fetal medicine. I'm very aware that there has been many obstacles and resistance from certain scientific or cultural circles in regards to your discoveries in the past, particularly, for example, the screening and diagnosis of Down syndrome. Could you tell us how you came up with this discovery?
Prof, I think you're muted still.
First of all, Nicolas, I thank you and Savas for help set up the Cypriot Medical Association. I also thank Mr. Fotiou and the government of Cyprus for the great honor, and Christos, friend, for his continuous efforts for the benefit of our problem in Cyprus. How did I come across the new method of screening for Downs? In 1992, I was doing a new experiment. I had a woman that had lost many, many babies from Rhesus disease. This is a disease where the mother produces antibodies that cross the placenta, destroy the baby's blood. The babies become anemic, and then they eventually die. And I had tried it with her, giving blood transfusions to the babies. But by the time she was coming to me at 16 weeks, which is the earliest that anybody could possibly do a blood transfusion, the babies were already dead or dying. And the new experiment for me was to see whether I could change the baby's blood group from positive to negative by taking marrow cells from herself to do a marrow transplantation into the baby at 12 weeks so that I could potentially change the baby's blood group. And this is something that drove me because of my Cypriot background. How come I say that? Well, a challenge that has always been in my mind is how to prevent babies from beta thalassemia, from suffering if they are born, or from being aborted. I wanted to change the baby's blood group by doing a marrow transplantation in utero. But I was not sure how early in pregnancy I had to do that before the baby's immunological system had developed. So I asked this woman, Cherry Rooms is her name, to come to me when she was 12 weeks so that I could take marrow from her and give a marrow transplantation. On arrival, I saw that the baby was already hydropic. There was a lot of fluid behind the baby's neck. And I thought that was extremely strange that at such an early stage, the baby had developed severe anemia. At that time, I was doing a different project where I was comparing amniocentesis with chorionic villus sampling as the method of fetal karyotyping, because the woman had already become quite old by the time she had come to me for this seventh pregnancy. I did an amniocentesis before the marrow transplantation. And 2 days later, I got the results back that the baby had Down syndrome. So my intense involvement with this woman over a number of years and the strange finding at the ultrasound scan and the coincidence that I was doing a research where I was checking the karyotype of the baby and I was receiving results 2 days later, brought things together. And I wondered whether there was a relationship between this collection of fluid behind the neck and Down syndrome. A few days later, as things go, I had another case again where I noticed a collection of extra fluid behind the neck, and I was doing an amniocentesis, and the baby again had Down syndrome. At that time, a lot of journalists were very interested in what we were doing. They were constantly calling me to find out if there were new stories. And there was a very nice and attractive woman from Scotland who was writing for the Sunday Times. And they said, I may have something. I took her to a Greek kebab house, Klimadragia, which is very near the hospital. And I always go there because it's quite cheap. We used to go with all of the research fellows. And I told her the story. And she said, but how are you going to find out if what you're saying is true? And because I wanted to seduce her, I opened my mouth and I said, well, all we need to do is examine 20,000 patients. There was no power calculation. I just wanted to seduce her and impress her. And she said, but where are you going to find these 20,000 people? I said, it depends on you. As from Monday, that was Friday, we will be able to examine patients from anywhere, at any time, every day, Monday to Sunday. And within 3 or 4 years, you had not 20,000, but you had 100,000 patients. And you needed 100,000 patients to work out the statistics. Because in these 100,000 pregnancies, there were 300 with Down syndrome, so that you could develop the appropriate model that led to a publication in the Lancet. So that was the scientific work. In the background to that, at that time, screening for Downs was based on a maternal blood sample taken at 16 weeks in pregnancy. So who opposed the introduction of the new method? The Royal College of Obstetricians, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, all of the major international societies, all of the biochemical and genetic societies, because, of course, there were entrenched interests in the biochemical method of screening, and there was a lot of money to be made out of that. And of course, many, many obstetricians, private obstetricians throughout the world that were making a lot of money by doing unnecessary amniocentesis on women that did not need to have this amniocentesis. But the biggest enemy, the biggest conservatism was found within my own field, the experts in fetal medicine. I suppose this is normal human behavior. If one of your kind discovers something and you have not, you may have a certain degree of jealousy. So you say, according to the Greek, ancient Greek Aesopos, the sour grapes, that this cannot possibly be good. So all of these institutions, all of these circumstances conspired against the introduction of the new method. It took 16 years from 1992 until 2008 before it was adopted. And then in a hysterical type of way, the whole world was adopting the new system. I was called by the National Screening Committee in England to help them introduce the new method in 2008 within 3 months. I said, you, for 16 years, you have been opposed to this system, and now in a hysterical fashion, you want to introduce it in 3 months? And of course, I said yes. So this is the story behind the nuclear translucency and Down syndrome.
That's amazing. That's amazing story. I knew parts of it, but not all of it. So I think, so I'm seeing that being charming is a learning point here. It helps
for the journalists,
recruit
in the kebab house.
For the journalists.
I see.
Yes. No, I'm just thinking, but that's very interesting because here we see someone that makes an observation, sees it's the ancient sort of scientific methodology where you see an observation, you make a hypothesis out of an observation, and you run a trial, an experiment to prove or refuse that hypothesis. I want to ask you what you said. You know, they've been kind of fighting fighting in inverted commas for 16 years. What have you been doing for these 16 years? Were you kind of practicing that? Were you giving diagnosis based on your ultrasound findings, or
two things really?
How did you manage?
I was stimulated by the reaction of the various groups. They were extremely important professors that were completely opposed to the new method. They were advocating the previous methods. In every lecture that I was giving, they would stand up and they would ask me questions about, have you proven this and have you proven that? So I'm very grateful to them because they gave me ideas of how to carry out more and more research and accumulate more and more data. That's what I was doing. I was collecting more data, and then I was making more observations from the nuclear translucency. A few years later, we noticed that babies with Down syndrome at 12 weeks were missing the nasal bone. And then a few years later, there was regurgitation across the tricuspid valve. Then there was abnormal flow in the ductus venosus. So the research was continuing. So at one level was increasing amounts of research, accumulation of data, publication in scientific journals. At the second level was educating professionals to carry out the test. And the most important thing was educating the women themselves. So I often considered it to be more important to give an interview to a women's magazine than publishing a paper in the Lancet, because the women themselves, the pregnant women, were searching for solutions to their own problem. And it was interesting again, because the first group of women that were extremely keen to take the new test were women that were over the age of 35. But what does that mean? It means that a lot of them are highly educated women that did not go and get pregnant at the age of 16, but they went into the professions. They were members of parliament, they were lawyers, they were doctors. So they had a disproportionately higher influence on the government, for example. Despite that, it took 16 years for the method to be adopted. But I was giving lectures every week in non-medical circles. I was speaking to women, women's organizations. So research, education of the general population, and training of doctors to carry out the new methods. And it's in relation to that, you may want to be discussing it separately, that I formed the charity, the Fetal Medicine Foundation, so I could give scholarships to people from all over the world to be trained in the new methods.
We'll definitely go back to Fetal Medicine Foundation at some point later on. But no, whilst you've been talking, you've been answering a lot of other questions that I had. So I suppose one of my questions was what made them after 16 years to adapt and to accept your views. Essentially, it was the build-up of and the wealth of evidence that you've been building up all the time, and as you said, the education and the other aspects of it, that at the end you left them no option really to
I think
embrace.
At the one level, we would want to believe that it was the accumulation of scientific evidence. I think that far more important than that, because a lot of the evidence had already accumulated decades earlier. It was the pressure exerted by the women's organizations. They had no option.
Yeah, and one of the questions I want to ask you, I always want to ask you this question because I wasn't sure if it was true. Is it true that women were marching outside your house to urge you to continue your work?
I had enormous amounts of support from women's organizations.
Interesting. Sava, I think that's my questions. Over to you.
Very interesting so far. Professor Nicolaides, I want to take you a little bit further back. And I want to ask you what attracted you to Obzengani as a specialty, as a junior doctor. And at the time when you were training, fetal medicine was pretty novel, pretty much at its infancy. How was it possible to gain experience in it? And what was it like training at the time?
Saba, there was no such thing as fetal medicine. It did not exist. I was a medical student at King's. I graduated in 1978. I didn't have any idea at all as to what I wanted to specialize in. Actually, I was not interested in medicine at all. My father was a doctor. I always wanted to do medicine purely because there was no alternative. I don't think that they forced me to think like that, but I could think of nothing else except doing medicine. But then I arrived in England, I went to the medical school, and the year was 1974. We had the fascist dictatorship in Greece, the coup against Makarios in Cyprus. A few days later, the invasion of Cyprus by Turkey. Do you think I was interested in histology and biochemistry and anatomy? Not at all. I was constantly thinking about the struggles of our people in Cyprus. I was actively involved, like you are now, in the student movement. At a certain point, I became the president of the Students' Union at the time. I was one of the first younger members before Christos joined. I don't think that he existed, the Cyprus Federation. We were demonstrating. We were joining up with other organizations. We had the dictatorship against Allende in Chile. We had Her Excellency Margaret Thatcher calling Mandela a terrorist, and we were joining up with other groups. And this is a lesson, even for now, and presumably this is what the Cyprus Federation is doing, joining up in common struggles with other organizations. So for me, demonstrating in London against the Turkish invasion, demonstrating in London against the dictatorship in Chile and against the apartheid in South Africa was a common cause. That's what I was interested in, not anatomy or gastroenterology, for God's sake. So I arrived at the end of my medical studies, and then suddenly something very strange happened. A very enthusiastic man arrived from Scotland, a new professor of obstetrics, a man that actually I heard from some friends of mine from Cyprus that were with him in Scotland when he was studying, that maybe he was a very dangerous clinician, and therefore they locked him up in a room with an ultrasound machine. So he became a world authority on ultrasound, and he arrives at King's, and in his inaugural lecture, I am there, and he's so extremely enthusiastic, and I fell in love with him, and I said, this is what I want to do. So it was one man in one lecture that suddenly destabilized me and made me enthusiastic about finding perhaps a new area of medicine. And I asked him, I'm scared of flying. I find it completely unnatural that these very, very heavy metals are being kept in the sky. So as all of you at medical school, you had to do an elective, and most of you, I don't know where you went, but most of the people went to the Seychelles or to Kauai, exciting holiday destinations. I didn't want to go anywhere because I was scared of flying. So I asked Professor Campbell whether I could stay at King's for my 3-month elective. And when I saw the moving images of the fetus within the mother's abdomen, I fell in love with this non-existent field of fetal medicine. I knew that I had to do obstetrics and gynecology to get into that. But that is how I got into fetal medicine. And that's why I found my way.
The rest is history.
Pretty much. Nicola?
No, Saba, you carry on. Or no. Oh, yes. So we are talking about the
Am I talking
Professor
too much? Am I disrupting?
No. You are destabilizing us because you've been answering all of our questions. So
And I think
you've mentioned the Fetal Medicine Foundation, which is obviously a huge chapter in your life and your career, and therefore we cannot not discuss it. So please tell us about when did you found the Fetal Medicine Foundation, and what are the achievements of the foundation?
Okay. Whatever you need to do, you need money. I needed to have an ultrasound machine, and I needed to pay for research fellows to help me. And I didn't have any money. I could not get any money from grants because the non-existent field was not an attractive area of grant giving for applications for grants. So I tried a few times. Nobody was interested in what I was asking money for. And then I went to the Greek and the Cypriot community, to some of the very wealthy people in our community, to ask for money. But I'm a peasant at heart, from Cyprus, from Paphos, and I am too proud really to go begging people to give me money. I tried it a couple of times, and I absolutely hated it when at the end of a dinner in an expensive hotel, somebody would pull out a check and give me £3,000. I said, I cannot stand this really. So at that time, by 1995, the nuclear translucency was widely known through the publicity, through the women's organizations, despite the opposition from the institutions. The women wanted it. So I decided to, rather than begging for money and having to say thank you, to charge people money and let them tell me thank you. So I had two options. I could open a private clinic and make a lot of money and go back to Cyprus and build a few hotels and buy a Lamborghini and run around after the donkeys of Paphos and get killed, or create a charity. And I created the Fetal Medicine Foundation as a charity because, again, I found it difficult for me to open a clinic and ask for people to give me money for my services. It was just against, I don't know, against my way of thinking. So I opened the charity, and the charity opened the private clinic. The clinic does not belong to me, it belongs to the charity. Mm-hmm. And I provided my services to the charity for free. So suddenly, from nothing, I was making £1 million a year, £1.5 million a year. So at that point, I did not need anybody at all. I didn't need the British government, I didn't need the Royal Colleges, I didn't need anybody to finance my research. At that time also, I became acutely aware that the discoveries that we were making had to be implemented throughout the world. Well, how do you do that? You either go with a big company and you get it patented and you get commissions, and then you let the big companies to profit enormously from marketing and promoting your discovery, the nuclear translucency, for example. Or my obsession was to make the test available as cheaply as possible to as many people as possible throughout the world. How do I do that? Well, give 80 scholarships a year to doctors from all over the world that would come. I will pay them, not force them to pay me to be trained, but I would pay them a bit of money to train them so that they could go back to their own countries and then they could introduce the new methods. So that is how I formed the Fetal Medicine Foundation.
That's amazing. Professor, I was thinking, how many PhDs have you awarded to trainees over the years? Is there a number?
We have so far had 60 PhDs, but in terms of, there are many people that have had many publications. Well, we had a publication with you because you are a brilliant student. I hope you continue to do that. Are you? Or
I do. I try.
Good. We have more than 1,500 publications, and almost always I put as first author my trainees. Yeah.
And that's quite it's remarkable, because what I noticed is that you've published 1,500 or 2,000 papers, and I'm sure if I tell you what is that paper is saying, you straight away you will remember it. You were involved in all those papers, because a lot of the times the professor is at the end of the names list there, and probably they haven't contributed at all. But you know all these papers inside out, which I always thought it's extremely impressive.
Apart from the papers that we wrote with you that I didn't understand very well, and because you were using new techniques, meta-analysis, the vast majority of the papers in which I was involved, I wrote myself.
All right.
My house is often, or was before the coronavirus, I had some research fellows in the kitchen and others in the living room, and others sitting next to me. We were analyzing the data together. I was writing the papers. I was making the slides for their lectures. So I'm that type of person. Yeah.
I remember that library there. So, Professor, before we move on, I'd like you to tell us as well about the Fetal Medicine Research Institute, which I've never been, but I've heard the best things about it. It's a massive building, very modern, very beautiful. And what have you done? You've built it and you've donated it to King's, or what's the arrangement?
Yes. Yeah, I hate hospitals. I think that pregnancy is not a disease. So always my dream was to have a place that would look more like a museum or an art gallery in which women would come. I tried for many years to convince King's to do that for me. And then at the end, I decided to do it myself. I just outside the train station, Denmark Hill Station, I found 6 falling apart houses. I bought them for £3.5 million, all of them. And then we borrowed money and we spent many millions of pounds to build my dream of an art gallery.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
Then,
I've seen pictures of it, but
yeah,
it looks beautiful.
Yeah, and it has a lot of. I have I invited the sculptors from Greece, so that when you come out of the train station, you see a beautiful sculpture of the naked pregnant Aphrodite, and then the DNA helix, which is exactly the same as the 2 snakes of Hippocrates on the stick. It's symbolic of that. And then you enter this place, and in front of you, you have a massive painting from my compatriot, Cypriot painter, Andreas Haradambidis. So the whole thing has a lot of elements of Greek. Outside my office, because I was a very heavy smoker, I built a garden with an olive tree. But one good thing about my recent illness is that they told me that if I don't stop smoking, I used to smoke 80 Marlboros a day, I would die from the chemotherapy. So me, a drug addict, within 3 hours, I stopped smoking. I couldn't believe it. I was convinced that I could never do it. You remember how I was smoking. I stopped. But anyway, I built this beautiful garden with an olive tree because I wanted to be going outside my office to smoke. But now it's unnecessary.
It's still beautiful. I'm sure it's still necessary. There's a lot of other uses. Professor, before I hand over to Savas for more questions, one last question. We've all watched you in the recent Netflix series, The Surgeon's Cut, featuring some of your pioneering work. A lot of people don't know, but that's not a new thing to you. I mean, you've starred other documentaries by BBC in the past as well. My question is, when they call you to feature in these documentaries, what's your agenda in a nice way? What messages do you want to convey to the audience? Or it may just be that, okay, I'm happy to talk about my achievements, but is there any message or anything that you want to people to know?
Nico, the most important thing is, as I have mentioned to you, the greatest support for my research, both in terms of the recruitment of patients and then the implementation of the findings into clinical practice, came from with women or women's organizations. So for me, it is an opportunity to communicate with potential pregnant women. And that is the main stimulus that I would say yes to an interview in a women's magazine. I would say yes to a documentary by the BBC and Netflix and so on. So that is what makes me say yes. It is stressful because you are carrying out procedures and you need to, in a very short period of time, get permission from the patient to participate and carry out procedures where you know things may go wrong. But so you just have to accept that reality and pretend that they are not in the background. In terms of the messages given from the Netflix to me, there are very many clear messages. One message is that in the modern era, where they want to flatten all values in the human race, in the era of this disgusting fascism, as I call it, of political correctness, where doctors are not doctors anymore, but they are employees. The government wants employees to go from 9 to 5, not have any particular attachment, and then out they go to carry on with their life. I wanted to pass on the message to people that there's a lot of people that are in medicine, not like bankers to make money, but because they believe that what they are doing is something that is worthwhile. They want to help people, and that is what makes them wake up in the morning. They really believe in what they are doing. So that was one message that is going against the current trend of what they want from the medical students. My daughter is a medical student, and before she was allowed to see patients, she had to do about 30 useless internet-based courses about sexual orientation, about fire regulations, how to wash your hands. Before you begin, you want to destroy the human interaction and that strong feeling that brought my father into medicine, brought me into medicine, and brought you and Savas into medicine. So that was one message, that there are people there in medicine that are not detached professionals, but they're caring, very caring people. The second message was exactly that interaction with the patients. Again, they want us to be very, very detached. It is almost scary nowadays to touch somebody. It is scary to make a joke. You should not. You should just see them as just dehumanize that relationship. And I wanted to show that that is an extremely important component of what medicine should be. So these were the two elements that, from my point of view, had to come through. I didn't have any major control over the producers of what is the final product, but those were certainly two things that I think have come through and is worthwhile for that.
I got you, and you certainly conveyed these messages. Sava, over to you.
And I think hearing your words tonight, there are a lot of medical students who are watching us, doctors, as well as many of your patients who are watching us and commenting on our YouTube channel. I think they'll find your words incredibly inspiring. We've been in awe the last half an hour, 45 minutes of your stories that you've been telling us. So thank you again on behalf of everyone. Your career has been very successful so far, despite its difficulties in the initial phase. Is there anything you would have done differently? Do you have any regrets?
I don't want to sound arrogant, but I neither have regrets nor is there something that I would have done different. I am quite happy with how things have gone. I have gambled a lot of the time over many aspects of my work. Maybe if I had not clashed with the institutions the way I did, in a very arrogant way, if I became part of the system, perhaps the methods would have been adopted earlier. But at the same time, I would have compromised what I believed in and what I felt was necessary to fight for. So I don't think I could have done things differently, actually. So, yeah.
Which do you think of your careers was harder, the clinical or the academic, or both, or none at all?
Of course, nowadays, again, people have to choose, isn't it?
Yeah.
And for the new generation, I think that by far the hardest career to follow is the academic career, because you are judged by the amount of money that you're able to bring in, like a footballer. And football clubs are buying footballers because they improve their ratings. And universities are doing the same. They go for people that will bring them money. And actually, there's another nomenclatura that has been formed that are sharing the various grants and the monies amongst themselves quite often. And you don't judge people by how much they have achieved or the impact that their work has had, but by how much money they have brought and quite often squandered. So academic work is much more difficult.
Yeah. Just before we move on to the next section, one of my last questions is for those young people out there who are listening to us today, not necessarily within medicine, what would your advice be if they want to, in order for them to achieve in their career, who may want to emulate some of your successes?
I want people to love what they're doing. I want people to be excited when they wake up and not to feel miserable that they have to dress and, oh my God, go to work. And I don't really care what they choose. It doesn't matter. They could be a ballet dancer, or they could be a doctor, or they could be a lawyer, they can be a banker, they can be whatever they want. But they must absolutely love what they're doing. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile. How do you find that thing to make you love it? That is more difficult. Because the example that I gave, and that's why I elaborated on it, was that I was lost in that respect. My love was in politics, was in Cyprus. It wasn't about anatomy and physiology and pharmacology. It was one man, one lecture that sparked that interest in that made me devote my life to. And I think that people come across it quite often, but they don't realize actually. So the only message I have to give is really do whatever you want to do, but you need to love what you do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor. Christo, would you?
Professor, let's speak a little bit about Cyprus now, if that's okay.
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier about your father, Herodotus, and he was a doctor, but I think less well known was that he was also a member of parliament and very close to Magarios. And so you've spoken about how your father helped shape your medical career, but my question for you is, did he help shape some of your political and social views as well as your medical ones? So
my father was, yes, he was a doctor, and he was I often refer to him as a terrorist. He was actively involved. He was one of the political leaders of EOKA. He was actively involved in recruiting people to join the revolution. He recruited the Bagoras Palikaridis, and as I mentioned in a recent interview, he felt guilty for many years afterwards for his death. So here I am. I'm born in 1953. We arrive in 1955. EOKA begins. My father is one of the first people to be arrested. The vast majority of people were young revolutionaries, school children actually, like Palikaridis, 16, 17 years old. And my father was an old man in his early 40s that arrives in prison in Kokino Trimithia, and he stays there for 3 or 4 years. So how am I influenced? I am influenced because I have to get in one of those disgusting buses of the time, where because of the massive length of time to arrive in these very windy roads in Cyprus, you end up having a lot of vomit all over the place in these buses. You arrive in Kokino Trimethia, you stand in very, very long queues, and then you see τα σειρματοπλέγματα, and then eventually you see your father behind a glass screen. So you are born a revolutionary. You are on that basis, you see the struggles of the people of Cyprus. My mother is from Famagusta, so when my father went to prison, we moved to Famagusta, and I remember I used to gather the children of the neighborhood. I used to stand on a stand and deliver speeches about the Oga and the Makarios and the struggles of Cyprus. I remember the day when Yallouros was a student in the secondary school with a Greek flag, and the British soldiers shot him dead. And I remember the demonstrations of the people afterwards. My mother took me to them. So that's how you are influencing the beginning of your career. Then my father comes out of prison. We have the independence of Cyprus, and very, very soon after that, we have the problems with the Turkish uprising, and then we have the continuous struggle for the maintenance of a unified Cyprus. Yes, I was close to my father, and I was close to Makarios, and I was watching how they were trying to overthrow Makarios and how various people were trying to divide Cyprus. So that's how I was. I was in the English school in Nicosia in 1970 when they tried to kill Makarios in the helicopter. And for the first time, the English school of Nicosia went into a demonstration because I gathered all the students. I was in the boarding school, and I gathered all the students to go to the presidential palace to give our support to Makarios. And I was told off by the administration for they told me that the English schools, the English school Nicosia's policies is not to participate in Cypriot politics. But I said, this is not Cypriot politics. Makarios is not a politician. Makarios is our national leader. Anyway, so I grew up within that type of an atmosphere. And then we had a dictatorship. So I knew exactly what the dictatorship meant for Cyprus. We had the military Greek officers that came to protect Cyprus. They were trying to overthrow the government of Makarios. We had a bomb in our house in Paphos because my brother was a supporter of Makarios. So yes, I grew up in a political family, Christos. Yeah.
And so you've always had an opinion about what's happening in Cyprus, and the year ahead doesn't look like an easy one with kind of continued Turkish aggression. So how do you see things evolving, and do you think the international community and the UK government should be doing more?
Christos, in 1974, our country was invaded and 40% of it was occupied by Turkey. I'm not referring to the Turkish occupation of Cyprus as a Turkish Cypriot coup, but I'm referring to it as an invasion by a foreign power. And I think to a great extent the Turkish Cypriots, whatever is left of them in Cyprus, have also suffered from this Turkish invasion. At that time, we had few options, didn't we? We had the option of fighting to the death, and I think that it was right that there was nothing to fight for because nobody was supporting us. The Greek government was completely destabilized by the dictatorship. They were not in any position whatsoever to support us. It was a futile concept that we would go into a war against Turkey. The second was to accept that reality and pretend that nothing had happened, try and save whatever was left, and try to rebuild our Cyprus on what we had and forget the 40% of Cyprus that was occupied by Turkey. And the third option, again, advocated by Makarios at the time, was or macrochronios, whatever that means. It means a long-term struggle. And it is the most difficult one to define because people are saying, but how long, how many centuries is this macrochronios going to last for? Is there a continuing macrochronos to recapture Constantinople, for example? Is it a delusion that we will one day be able to reunify Cyprus? You are there, Christos. The Cypriot Federation is there. Our ambassador, our High Commissioner, Andreas, is there because somehow we believe that we are not deluded in continuing this struggle of reunification of Cyprus, defining, as you have always done, what has happened in Cyprus as a pure Turkish occupation, by defining that Talat is not really a true representative of the Turkish Cypriots, but he is an agent or a representative of Erdogan and Turkey. So how come then we move on with our advocacy for a united Cyprus? We have to have intercommunal talks, and somehow we must reach a solution, a peaceful solution. We cannot win a military solution. It's going to be extremely difficult, and Erdogan and the new Turkish Cypriot administration have demonstrated it's going to be even more difficult than before. But we must go in with limited expectations, otherwise we will have another great disappointment, and we will reach the same point that they want us to reach. It's futile fighting. We might as well divide Cyprus. Let's partition Cyprus. Let them go on the north. We go in the south. Maybe they can give us a few pieces of land like Varosha or Morphu, and then we will go our own ways. But that is a very naive way of thinking of this. It is not going to be a solution of the partition of Cyprus. It's going to be a continuous problem that one day soon will lead us to the whole of Cyprus being taken over by Turkey. So our only way is through the intercommunal talks, and we need to continue to fight for a federal united Cyprus. Is it difficult? Exceptionally so. Will you be as old as your father is, Christos, by the time we reach this solution, if ever? It may well be, but we have no other option.
Thank you, Kypros. So I'd just like to get your comments on what the Presidential Commissioner announced earlier, that the President of Cyprus has decided to award you the Grand Cross, the Order of Magarios III, and obviously 2 years ago awarded you the Medal for Exceptional Contribution. How does it make you feel to see the Republic of Cyprus kind of recognizing your achievements and conferring the highest civilian honor on you?
Christos, I have received a lot of awards from different universities in different countries, and I'm always very, very grateful. One of the greatest moments, of course, for me was in the University of Warsaw, when I entered this magnificent palace. Everybody was dressed up in their usual important gowns. And at that time, when they asked me from the university whom to invite, I said, well, invite the Cypriot ambassador and the Greek ambassador. And the Cypriot ambassador said yes, and he was there. She was there. The Greek ambassador said, but he's not Greek. So when I entered this magnificent hall, and they started playing the Greek national anthem, I started crying with, you see, with enormous pride for being Greek Cypriot. So to me, any awards that come from Cyprus fill me with enormous pride, because I feel so very proud to be Greek Cypriot.
Thank you, Professor. Nicola, over to you.
We're also very proud that you're here with us, Professor, and that you know you are a pharos, a lighthouse of inspiration to all of us. I have a couple of questions. One question that I made up now when I heard you talking. We said that you don't have any regrets about what you have achieved and your career pathway and so on. But clearly you care about Cyprus so much, and you have political views. Is this something maybe that that eluded you, the fact that you haven't been, obviously you have been involved, but not, let's say, on the floor, very actively involved, although your opinion always matters and it's been open always?
Because I was very actively involved when I was a student. And then, as I said, as soon as I qualified in medicine, I became obsessed with medicine. I am actively involved in my mind. Every morning when I will wake up, I will read in that sequence. I will not mention the specific newspapers from Cyprus, but I will read 3 newspapers from Cyprus, and then I will look at the BBC News. But it is true that I'm not involved like Christos and you and Savas. Occasionally, when certain politicians would come from Cyprus, I will go and meet them. And certainly, when I felt very, very strongly about the Henry Annan plan, I was active at that time.
Yeah.
As Christos has mentioned, a couple of years ago, on the 25th of March, 1st of April celebrations of the Greek and the Cypriot struggle, I gave a talk. But I'm not as actively involved as I would have liked and as you should and others should be. And I want to urge the medical students. I want to urge the other professionals that may be listening that it is critically important. We have a fantastic High Commissioner. I just spoke to him. He rang me a few weeks ago, and I was very impressed by his clear way of thinking. They actually mentioned you to him during that conversation, how he can mobilize a new type of a professional from the Cypriot community to work at a more sophisticated level rather than just doing what we used to do in the 1970s demonstrations outside Downing Street and outside the Turkish embassy. Those are important as well, but I think that you have to move on as a community to something much more sophisticated, something which would require professionals like you interacting with other professional organizations so that you can exert the maximum pressure in the British government, which I think is even more important than the Turkish government, and certainly much more important than the Greek government in finding a peaceful solution for Cyprus.
It's a totally different game, definitely now. Prof, before I hand over to Savas, what do we expect from you? What's the next plans? What's the next goals?
The first goal is for me to manipulate the hospital to give me the second vaccine. Mm-hmm. This idiotic decision of Mr. Boris Johnson, that they, having managed to kill a lot of healthcare professionals in the first wave because they sent their troops into war without any protective gear, so they died. And then they said, let's clap for them because they have died, the great heroes. This time, all healthcare professionals should receive a proper vaccination, dose 1 and dose 2, rather than arbitrarily delay the second dose for 3 months. I hope that I would be able to get the second dose in a couple of weeks, and I will be back in the hospital working again. I have been away in lockdown from last April, and it's driving me mad. In terms of my research, I have to fight for the implementation of screening for preeclampsia. Again, I have been working on that for 30 years. We had a New England Journal publication, a randomized trial of first trimester screening, and a massive reduction in the risk of preeclampsia with simple medication like aspirin. There is no interest at all, but I'm going to fight. I know how to fight better this time so that it doesn't take 16 years before that is implemented. And of course, we will continue our research into the very many areas that kill women and babies, premature delivery being the most important. So more research, more education, more scholarships for more people from all over the world to come and train, and more pressure on the government to implement some of our findings into clinical practice.
Thank you, Professor. Sava.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. Professor, you've mentioned a couple of times now the COVID pandemic and lockdown. You're someone who we can all tell just by listening to you today who thrives on human interaction, patient contact. And for various reasons, you've had to be at home isolating. How has that affected you? How has it impacted on you?
How do you think? You are a doctor. Can you make the diagnosis of that I have not gone mad yet? Okay. I was lucky because I was very actively involved in research, Sava. So I had a lot of data to analyze. I had a lot of papers to write. On a daily basis, my team will call me to discuss with me the various cases. And it's extraordinary what this technology does to you. But I had trained my team well to do laser surgery and other procedures, but I had not trained them to do fetal. This is where you put the balloon in the fetal trachea, because we didn't have many cases last year. But we had 2 cases recently, and using this mobile and FaceTime, I was able to direct our team on how to put the balloon in the fetal trachea. So there is a certain degree of interaction. I then, in the middle of the pandemic, when everybody was exceptionally depressed in March, April last year, when 1,000 people were dying every day, I decided that I would interact with people, and I introduced a free webinar where, before anybody else thought of doing the same. And we have 15, 16,000 people from 170 countries. And every Sunday from 3 o'clock for an hour, we had discussions and presentation of research. And that became the highlight for many, many doctors all over the world that were extremely depressed during that period of time. In July, at the end of July, on the 30th of July, Turkish invasion of Cyprus, I went in the hospital for a marrow transplantation, and I was scared to have it on that day because I said, this is a disaster day for me, for Kypros and Kypros. So I asked them to delay it for the 21st of July. And then it was a bit difficult, the period following that. But now I feel very, very well, and I want to go back. And I want to go back, and I will go back on the 1st of February. I will be in the hospital.
You mentioned your cancer diagnosis. How has it changed you as a person?
As I mentioned in the documentary in Netflix, I never thought that I would die. Not because I'm arrogant about that, but it didn't really preoccupy me. You don't think of death until you think a bit about it when your parents die, and it did affect me at the time, the loss of my parents, but I was a long way off in my timetable from that event called death. Because I'm not in Cyprus, I'm not witnessing my various classmates dying from cancers and car accidents and cardiovascular disease. So I was in a sense, and in Obzengani, in obstetrics, you don't see death. It's not like your specialty. So I thought that I was sort of, in some respects, immortal. And then on the day that they told me that I have this condition, multiple myeloma, I went to Wikipedia and I read it up as a good doctor, as a good source of information, and it said I would die within a year or 2. And I said, bloody hell, this is not very, very nice. So that destabilized me for that day. I was lucky because the next day I saw a great man, a professor of hematology at King's, who is a good friend for many years, who comes from the old school of medicine. I went to his office and I said, look, what is this terrible condition? And he put me in his arms and he said, Kypros, don't worry. I don't want you to read anything else in this internet. There has been tremendous progress in this field, and I'm not going to let you die next year. I said, okay, thank you very much. And then I became much more optimistic. But it is absolutely true. When you are suddenly told news of that nature, then you realize that your vulnerability. You realize that one day, sooner or later, you're going to die, and it makes you reflect on your whole life. What have you done? What do you want to do more? Yeah, so it did affect me.
On a slightly different note, I know you haven't been able to go back to Cyprus in a while because of the current situation. When you do go back, do you feel like you've gone, obviously, do you feel like this is truly home, you're there? And also, do you have a specific ritual or something that you do when you go that you'd never miss out whenever you go back?
Yeah, very difficult question, Saba. Tell me, how long have you been in England, Saba?
16 years now. I came to study as a...
I often tell people that after 10 years, arrange for your funeral in the new place. You are going to be buried, you are going to die where you have moved. And at most, I said, I'm going to die in England, but I want my body to be taken to Cyprus because it's very cold to be buried in England. I came in England when I was 17. It was, as I said, a period of time of a very great turmoil within Cyprus. We had that period of nasty dictatorship in Greece. We had the Oga Vida by that time in Cyprus. It was a very bad time. And then I arrived in England, and then bang, we had the dictatorship. Then we have the invasion of Cyprus, and suddenly you create a vision of the people of Cyprus that are fighting for their survival, and you raise many expectations about these people. I did not go back to Cyprus until from 1970 until 1980, when I went back to join the army, because I came at the age of 17 in England. And then my impressions when I arrived were of extreme disappointment. I did not meet the people that I created in my mind, these fighting people for democracy, for freedom and so on. I found people that were obsessed with wealth, with show off. And I said, but is this what have I been so completely deluded? I went to Paphos and I couldn't find anything that I could recognize. And every time I go now, I see all these skyscrapers that are off. They're going to be empty because they were built for developers to make money and deliberately keep them open because nobody wants to come and live in there. And various things that disturb me. Hawaii restaurant in Paphos. But what does Paphos have to do with a Hawaii restaurant? I wanted to vomit when I heard that I will go to a Hawaii restaurant in Paphos to eat. But then I was very cruel on the people of Cyprus. So at that time I said, I'm not staying here. This is not what I thought was Cyprus. But then after a few years, I realized that those people had to survive. Half of Cyprus was completely destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of refugees. They had to rebuild their life. They could not rebuild their life every morning waking up with a Greek or the Cypriot flag fighting for what? But the truth of the matter is, I grew up in England. I like being here. I enjoy my stay in England. I like the fact that if I don't want to see anybody, I don't have to see anybody. I don't have to go every Saturday to 5 weddings and 3 funerals. I have changed myself. So whenever I go back to Cyprus, I search for a Cyprus that I created in my mind as a 15-year-old. So there's a clash there. I will stay in England, but as you can hear from my pronunciations, as the years go by, I became more and more obsessed with my roots, whatever these roots are, whatever they are, or whatever I created the roots to be in my own mind, about my country, about Cyprus. That's why I love Cyprus so much, even if I'm not there. Now, the rituals that I follow when I go back. I will always go to Paphos, and I will go to the village of my grandfather, and I will visit a cemetery. Because the nice thing about cemeteries is that you meet a lot of people that you knew when you were a child. It has very nice photographs of everybody. And that reminds you of your roots. So the cemetery is the only thing that reminds me of my roots, because my house, which is in the main road in Paphos, Grivadieni, the main, in the main street before the nice buildings, the Dimarchio and so on, has now been converted into a monstrosity of a skyscraper that will remain empty forever. I go down to Kado Paphos, where the Mbanya was, where I used to go and swim, and I don't recognize anything at all. So the cemetery of my grandfather is the permanent ritual. Whenever I go to Cyprus, I will go and visit that village.
That's that's really interesting to hear, Professor. And I think food for thought for a lot of us, particularly within medicine, who by default are here for 6 years of medical school and then at least another 10 years of training. Before I hand over to Christos and the High Commissioner, on behalf of everyone tonight and the Cyprus Medical Society, we'd like to thank you for offering your precious time tonight. It's a real pleasure and honor to be able to announce that you have accepted our invitation to be the patron of our society. And we're all extremely grateful and really excited by this. And we know that under your guidance and from everything we've heard tonight, we'll be able to inspire the next generation of doctors in the UK. So thank you very much.
I thank you and I congratulate both of you and Nikos for your efforts. You will succeed because you're good people. I love you both. I have watched you over the years, and you're the type of people that I want to be in medicine. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
But on behalf of the Federation, I would also like to huge thank you to you. We are incredibly proud of what you represent as a flag bearer, not just for our diaspora in medicine, but more broadly. And I think you touched on actually something about inspiring the next generation. And one thing I wanted to also thank you for was supporting the Federation's newly launched Cypriot Professionals Network, which is aimed to inspire and mentor the next generation. And whilst this initiative covers all sectors and all professions, I'm very grateful to the Cyprus Medical Society in the UK, to Nicola, Sava and yourselves for coordinating this initiative for medical students. So if anyone is watching and does want to either register as a mentor or a mentee, visit our website, cypriotfederation.org.uk/UKCPN and sign up there. So with those few words on behalf of me and the Federation, thank you very much. And I'd now like to ask His Excellency the High Commissioner, Mr. Andreas Kypros, to offer some closing remarks.
Thank you, Christo, and congratulations to you, to Nicolas and to Savas as well, for organizing this fascinating conversation with Professor Kypros Nicolaides. You know, on occasions, words seem superfluous. They seem never to be enough. And I think whatever I say after listening to you, Kypros, this evening, wouldn't come close to expressing, on the one hand, the humility that I feel having listened to you, and on the other hand, the pride that I have at this particular moment in time, knowing that a Cypriot such as yourself is a pioneer in his field, is a mentor and an inspiration to so many people, both those that you have trained, but also everybody, I believe, that has been fortunate enough to listen to you this evening. Really, it has been truly an honor to listen to you. We did speak not too long ago. I hope it's the first of many. I told you then, and you mentioned it, and I feel it very passionately as somebody who is part of the diaspora, who was born and raised here in the United Kingdom, that as a community, we have incredible individuals where collectively we can punch above our weight. And I think as Cypriots in the UK, we have a lot to offer, and collectively we have a lot that we can do. And as High Commissioner, I'm looking forward to working with everybody to reach that potential that exists. I'm very, very pleased to see, apart from the recognitions that you have undoubtedly received and deserve from around the world, that the Republic of Cyprus too will be honouring you with the Grand Cross of the Order of Magarios III, well-deserved, Kypros. And all it leaves me to say is congratulations again. We wish you well in your recovery. I know just listening to you, that nothing is going to keep you away from the hospital on the 1st of February. So good luck going back there. And again, to Christos, to Nicolaides, and to Savas, congratulations for putting this event together. To all three of you, to thank you also as High Commissioner for everything that you have done during this period, during the Corona period for Cypriots over here. Savas and Nicolaides and your other colleagues who have answered so many questions of Cypriots who were concerned and had issues that needed to be dealt with. An incredible service to the community. I wish the Cyprus Medical Society all the very best. And again, just to congratulate you, Kypros, Kathe Kalon, Sikharitiria, and to everybody that's listening, a happy and healthy 2021. Keep safe and look forward to continuing this. Thank you, Christo, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Christo, do you want me to say something, or?
If you want to say something, yes, go for it.
Well, again, I want to thank you for putting this together. I want to congratulate you, Christos, because you were born and you grew up in England. Of course, you were the victim of your father, who is obsessed with Cyprus. But it's fantastic to be seeing a young man like you, complete second generation Cypriots, being so very actively involved with Cyprus. And as you have discussed before, and with Andreas, the desire really to create and establish and expand a network of young Cypriot professionals as the next phase of our struggle for our macrochronio. So I wish everybody well, and I wish, of course, all the Cypriot medical students, the Cypriot doctors, the elements of the Cypriot community that have been with us tonight, a happy and healthy new year.
Thank you, Gibran. And just in closing, thank you to the many, many hundreds of people who've been watching live on YouTube, and thank you for all the engagement. Lots of questions around whether Gibran's webinars are still online, whether he did manage to seduce that Scottish reporter. So thank you very much.
We're too old for me by the end of the collection of the data.
Thank you very much, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I think we should stop going. We should stop being live now.
Christo, excellent. Thank you.